Shadows in the alley. The rain fell in sheets that night, turning Chicago into a smear of neon and water. Detective Lena Cross pulled her collar high against the wind as she stepped into the narrow alley. The body was already cooling against the bricks. A professor, she was told. A mugging, the others said. But Lena saw what they didn't. The man's wallet was still tucked neatly into his jacket. His watch gleamed on his wrist. And above him, on the damp wall, a chalk symbol curled like a question mark left for her alone. Her partner, Jensen, barely looked up from his notepad. Another robbery gone sideways. We'll file it quickly, keep the stats clean. No, Lena said. Her voice was low, steady. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. Jensen sighed, already impatient. You're seeing ghosts again, Cross. But Lena had learned long ago that the ghosts were the only ones worth chasing. The coroner confirmed her suspicion the next day. The professor's wounds weren't random, they were deliberate, surgical. Then came the second murder. The club was still humming when Lena arrived. The neon sign sputtered above the door, flickering pink and blue across the wet pavement. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the sour tang of spilled gin. A saxophone moaned faintly from the jukebox, its notes hanging in the haze, telling its story that there would be no live performance tonight. The singer was backstage, crumpled against her dressing table. Her eyes stared glassy at the ceiling, mouth still painted a sultry red, as if she'd been caught mid-song. A silk scarf was knotted tight around her throat. Jensen stood near the door, hands in his pockets, already impatient. Another tragic night in show business. Some jealous lover, maybe. She was bound to have enemies. But Lena wasn't listening. Her gaze fixed on the mirror. Scratched into the glass, with something sharp and steady, was the symbol she'd seen in the alley. This time, it was bolder, more deliberate. She touched the edge of the carving. Her reflection fractured into pieces around it. No lover did this, she murmured. Later that night at the precinct, she flipped through the singer's old case records. One detail stood out, a testimony given 20 years ago, against a syndicate lieutenant. Her words had sealed his fate. Not random. Not at all. The third murder came the next day, a retired judge, sprawled across his study desk, silver hair matted with blood. His fountain pen was still clutched in one hand, as though he'd been writing when death came for him. On the polished surface, smeared in blood with careful precision, was the same chalk-like mark. But this time it wasn't chalk at all. This time, it was painted in red. The room smelled of iron and old paper. Case files lay scattered, as though he'd been searching for something in a panic. One folder caught Lena's eye. She slipped on gloves and pulled it closer. Inside were grainy photographs, raids, arrests, familiar faces. All tied to the task force that had been formed to hunt down a criminal syndicate. All the names that now ended up in morgues. Jensen's voice broke the silence. Cross, we're supposed to log and bag everything, not chase your pet theories. She closed the file and tucked it back under the others. These aren't theories, she said softly. They're patterns. Someone's hunting the hunters. She needed answers. That led her to Marco Ruiz, a former enforcer for the syndicate. Now just a washed-up informant. She found him in a downtown bar which oozed a smell of sweat and beer, the kind of place daylight never reached. Marco Ruiz sat alone in a booth, a heavy-set man gone soft around the middle, his once sharp eyes dulled but not extinguished. His hands trembled faintly as he nursed a glass of whiskey. When Lena slid into the seat across from him, he chuckled without humor. Detective Cross. I knew one day someone would come sniffing around. I need to know about the task force, Lena said. The professor, the singer, the judge, they're all dead. And all roads lead back to the same names. Yours included. Ruiz took a slow sip, studying her over the rim of his glass. You think they were heroes, don't you? Cleaning up the city. That's the fairy tale they sold you. Truth is, they were butchers. They picked the winners and losers. My boss went down, yeah, but so did men who never broke a law. Like who? Lena pressed. His gaze dropped. For a moment, something like shame flickered across his face. Most are now faceless and forgotten. But one still has family to remember. A shopkeeper. Good man. Honest. They needed a scapegoat, so they made him one. He lost his business, his name, his life. Killed himself. Left behind a daughter. Ruiz's voice cracked. She was maybe 12. Quiet eyes. The look that had seen too much and felt too deep. She was put into foster care. Then one day, gone. Like smoke. Lena's throat tightened. She leaned in. What was her name? Ruiz shook his head. Her name escapes me. Too much whiskey, too long ago. But the family name was Varga. If she's out there, she's not that girl anymore. And if she's the killer, those eyes will burn through everyone who wronged her. He downed the rest of his whiskey, setting the glass down hard. Be careful, detective. If you keep digging, you'll find yourself buried right alongside them. Lena sat back, her pulse heavy in her ears. But she already knew she wouldn't stop. Back at the precinct she dug into archives. The shopkeeper's name was Ernest Varga. His daughter Maria. The trap was simple. She staked out the last surviving member of the task force, a retired detective in an area too upmarket for his pension. She waited, her pulse steady, her gun cold against her palm. Hours passed. Then a flicker of movement. She caught her in the act, a woman, sharp-eyed, her face lined with a life lived in the shadows. She froze as Lena's gun leveled at her chest. You're Maria Varga, Lena said. The shopkeeper's daughter. Maria smiled faintly. So you figured it out. She didn't run. Didn't beg. They ruined my father. Called him a criminal. He died for their lie. I was just a child. Tell me, detective, what would you have done? What will you do now? Lena's finger tightened on the trigger. A saxophone played somewhere in the distance, mellow notes drifting through the night. They called it justice, Maria said, her voice rising with fury. But it was corruption. They built their empire on his grave. And now I'm giving them what they gave him. Lena's breath caught. She thought of the symbol on the wall, of the city's bright towers standing on rotten foundations. And she knew that if Maria went to trial, the truth would vanish again in sealed records and polite denials. Lena lowered her gun. Her voice was tight. Go. I never saw you. For the first time. Maria's eyes softened. She nodded once, then melted into the night along with the mellow notes from the saxophone. Lena filed her report the next morning. The suspect fled. Investigation ongoing. Her captain's eyes lingered on her. Unlucky night Cross. His tone said more than his words. But he didn't push. He didn't need to. The silence told her everything. That evening, Lena walked through the rain-soaked streets alone. Neon shimmered in the puddles, bending the city into warped colors. She stopped, listened to the sounds of the city. What she had done was justice. She pulled her coat tighter, walked on, her steps echoing in the dark. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. And in the silence of the alley, she welcomed it.